Good morning. These are the responsible people who went home early last night. Welcome. I am Kristen Smith, and I run the Blockchain Association, which is a trade association based in Washington, D.C. We represent over 100 of the leading companies in the blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem, and we're super excited to be a partner association with the Consumer Technology Association, and very grateful that they have allowed us to include some programming here today. We have a little slogan at the Blockchain Association that is simply crypto here for good. And one of the things that we want to do this morning is talk about not only why this is an enduring technology that is going to be the basis for so many things that we do and build and experience in the future going forward, but also to highlight the positive impact that crypto and blockchain technology is having on our society, despite the fact that we have seen a lot of very negative headlines around the ecosystem in recent days. So very excited to have the promise and power of crypto highlighted here at CES. Real quickly, just to get a sense of the audience, how many of you are involved in or work for the crypto industry? Okay, so a few. And how many are here because you're interested to learn more? Okay, that we should be able to help with today. I think, I watch a lot of CNBC every morning, kind of gets me out of bed. And I think there's often sort of this misconception that crypto is some sort of alternative currency, and that it's something that is maybe meant to replace the dollar or compete with the U.S. dollar. But really, I think that digital cash may have been the very first Bitcoin. Bitcoin is described as digital cash. It was the very first use of crypto networks, but it is far from the last. And what we often talk about today is how crypto networks are really the foundation for what we call Web 3. Web 1 is the one that we all knew back in the 90s with our dial-up modems, where we would just receive the content that others had curated for us. Web 2 was a much more interactive internet, one where we were both consuming content, but also contributing our own content, and I think that's largely the web that we live in today. But Web 3 is one that adds this element of ownership to the internet, and this allows us to own property in the form of NFTs. It allows us to own digital assets that we can use for payments. It also allows us to own our own data. And so today we're going to get much deeper into some of these use cases, which I hope will be useful for this audience here. We're going to have a series of 3 panel discussions this morning. I'll be moderating the first one. The theme around this first one is giving the power back to the user, and we're going to go deeper into art and data and money and some of those use cases that I think are most promising and interesting. After that, we have a panel that's going to highlight the greener future that blockchain and cryptocurrency can enable. I know a lot of people think about Bitcoin immediately and Bitcoin mining, but next generation blockchains are very different, and there's actually some great programs in place to incentivize a greener future. And then finally, we'll go into some of the lesser known use cases of crypto and why they are here for good. So with that, why don't we dive into our first discussion, and I will call up Hannah and Andy and Dominic to stage, and we will get going. Boy, girl up here. Kind of change the order up. All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone, again, for joining us. I want to start by asking each of our panelists to, one, talk a little bit about themselves and their role at their organization, but I think also, importantly, talk about what your organization does. So why don't we start out with Dominic with Storage.
Thank you so much. Dominic Marino. I'm a solution architect at Storage. I've been there for 2.5 years now. And we are a decentralized object storage network. So we specialize in storing data and delivering that data, much like Amazon S3 does, to customers as performantly, at the lowest possible cost, and with the best reliability.
Hannah? It should be, come on.
Hi, I'm Hannah Siegel-Gardner. I work at ArtBlocks. I'm our Chief Marketing Officer. ArtBlocks is I'll just toot our own horn a little bit. I feel like we're the premier generative art platform for Web3, and we operate on the Ethereum blockchain.
And I'm Andy Gallucci. I'm the Director of Regulatory Strategy at Circle, which is an internet-native finance company that provides businesses the ability to send, spend, save, all at the speed of the internet. We issue USDC and Eurocoin, which are more generically known as stable coins, which are one-to-one backed by the currency underpinning them.
Great. Thank you. Dominic, why don't we start with you? And we talked a little bit about this idea of Web3 and bringing ownership and private property rights to the internet. Can you go deeper into what storage does and how it sort of relates to this idea of a next generation internet and what that might mean?
Absolutely, thank you. At Storage, we don't own any hard drives, yet we have exabytes of storage capability. How do we do that? Well, what we've done is we've used the Web3 ethos to build a product that involves the community, it involves you. So anyone from a data center operator to a prosumer at home can add a storage node to the network, become part of the storage economy, right? And that brings them opportunity that to date has only been centralized in the big three, the Googles, right? The Amazon, the Microsoft, the big hyperscalers. So Web3 for us is really solving the ability to allow anyone to get into this market. And it has the side effect of course, building a much better product because the distribution of storage makes it faster, makes it more CDN-like, makes it better, faster, and ultimately the best value.
Can you talk a little bit and go deeper on that? If you're an individual or a company who wants to participate, who do you have to get permission from to do that? How do you become involved in participating in the network?
Absolutely. You need permission from no one but yourself. So you can just come in, create a node ID, and you, of course, have to vet to the network, right? You can't sign up to be a storage provider and not be good at it. So what happens is when you've joined the network, we go through a vetting process where the node is tested and continually reviewed, and we just assure that it meets the needs of the network. But there are no barriers to entering. There's no applying. There's nothing in your way.
That's amazing. Hannah, why don't we go to you? Can you talk a little bit about how ArtBlocks fits in with the world of Web3 and what the connection is there? And also just a quick note, I can't see the time clock, so someone tell me when I need to wrap up. The stage is like in the way.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it brief since we can't see the clock. So we really wouldn't be here without Web3. Digital art has been around since, let's just say, the 60s and the 70s when supercomputers were getting off the ground and people were starting to tinker with them and get excited about outputs. But being able to store something immutably on the blockchain is really what gives our assets utility and power. And so I think we're really, we're here at the right place and time because this technology exists, but this as a creative coding as a practice is amplified by blockchain. So I would see that's our primary intersection with Web3.
Well, and, I think there's been some sort of, there's a lot of jokes around the internet that you can sort of like right-click and save, or you can take a screenshot or something, or why is having the ownership on the blockchain important?
Right, so I think probably everybody in this room is familiar with the idea that you have proof of ownership once you have a token attached to your digital asset. But for us, it's really kind of combining more than just the NFT. It's really, when you purchase a piece of art at Art Blocks, you're getting the code, you're getting to be a part of a project in a community, and there's increased utility there beyond just having a contract that says I own this.
And Andy, let's go to you. I think what Circle is doing with USDC is amazing. Can you and in some ways is a, sort of a simple. It's maybe a better form of digital cash than Bitcoin was, but it's much more interesting, I think, than that. Can you talk about some of the how that relates to Web3, the programmability features, and how it fits into the ecosystem?
Absolutely. I think fundamentally understanding Web3 from a financial payments perspective is understanding the interconnections that were developed in Web 2 that can be transposed onto the ability to transact in real time at internet speed on the blockchain. And what that means is really taking some of the benefits that most disproportionately went to economies of scale in Web 2 and bringing those down to the individual company and user level. So it's very important, I think, to kind of put this in perspective by comparing it to the things that didn't get pulled forward in, let's say, Web 2. The example that first comes to mind being, the fact that every day when we transact, whether you're ordering products that are Amazon or, from across the world, you're still relying on the same financial networks that were developed in the 1970s by the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transfers. And that is, that system, that messaging, all that infrastructure is being upgraded in a way that now allows peer-to-peer transfers in the exact same fashion at the far faster speed, and more importantly, at a much lower transaction cost.
Great. Dominic, why don't we come back to you for a second? So I think, as you all have described, there are a lot of uses of crypto and crypto networks that are unrelated to speculation, and the use cases are very promising. Can we talk a little bit about where we are in terms of adoption? Like, do you have any numbers or sense of like where we are in the building phase? Because I think from where I sit, I don't see us, I don't live in a Web3 world today. I don't transact or do most of my payments using USDC yet. I've done it a little bit on occasion, but where are we at in the process, and what are some of the steps that we need in order to have greater adoption?
All right.
We can come back to you if you want.
No, that's good. So let's focus on doing real work. So the networks now, and when I say the networks, I'm talking about the storage network, which of course is data storage and data delivery, is mature enough at this point that we're doing over 300,000 HD video streams a day from our network. That's something we wouldn't have dreamt of doing 2 years ago. But it turns out when you create massive amounts of parity and then share that parity around the globe or in the region that you've selected, well, you built a CDN, so why don't you use it? So what's so interesting here is we're at a point where I, as a solution architect, can meet with someone in fintech, can meet with someone in media and entertainment, can meet with someone who's a sysadmin, right? And they're dealing with hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data. And we're actually the better technical choice today. We're a better value. We offer performance that they can't realize due to the parallelism of the network. That is, again, an ethos of Web3, decentralizing. And in the end, because people are able to bring their latent capacity, that server that they're not using anymore, that NAS that they decommissioned a few months ago, because you can bring latent capacity, it's about 1/10 the cost, right? So we're at this point where I can walk into a meeting and it makes sense for them to say yes, for them to use our network. It's actually better than what they're offering in Web 2. That's the adoption point. That's when it grows like crazy, and we're seeing that today.
And I want to just pick up on something you just said. So you're talking about these networks. Anyone in this room can decide to join the storage network. who is doing the selling in all of this? Is it the individuals who are belonging, or what is sort of the organizational structure?
So there's the supply and the demand side. For the supply side, there is zero selling. It's the community. There's a whole community built around this. What happens when you and your friends in the community see your storage nodes doubling in egress that month, which means you're receiving a much larger payout? Well, of course, you add more storage nodes, you make them faster, you add bandwidth. That is a completely organic economy that's been built that requires no selling. Now, if we were to bring on an enormous customer, so let's use a fun name. Let's imagine Netflix hears this, and they're like, we'd like to do business with you. We can do things to incentivize people adding more nodes to the network, but to date, that's been unnecessary. On the supply side, we do have a sales team focused on both Web 2 and Web 3 efforts. Sorry, I meant to say demand side, to be clear. So on the demand side, we do have a sales team. I do sit on that team for about a quarter of my time. And yeah, we're getting a great response in industry. No more are we the odd, forward-leaning project that might be interesting to talk to. We're the solution they heard that is better than what they're using today.
Very cool. Hannah, what about you? What do you see in terms of the people who are using art blocks, and what are they doing with it, and who is the community that is empowering this?
So that's really interesting. That's kind of like the secret sauce that I talk about a lot with potential corporate partners. And the hard truth is that there isn't one. So I would say people are onboarding into art blocks for many different reasons. I know we were talking about speculation earlier. That's definitely a part of it. People are excited about the art form. People were early adopters to cryptocurrency, and so they've been playing in the space for a while, and they see that this is a kind of different digital asset for them that's also part of their identity. So it's really kind of a different interaction at art blocks. Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I think the thing that excites me most, getting back to something you mentioned, Chris, about the programmability of stablecoins and blockchain technology. I mean, we're starting to see a client base that is doing things like fractionalizing property ownership or creating automated settlement systems, escrow accounts, some of the existing financial infrastructure that, to be frank, is not necessarily the most sexy, but is really foundational to reducing some of the inefficiencies and the cost adds through the financial system. Last year, Circle cleared $4.5 trillion in USDC, which, just to put it in perspective, is more than MasterCard, American Express, and Discover combined, which really speaks to the fact that the scalability at both the kind of large scale of meeting or matching some of the major payments infrastructure, as well as that kind of individual tailored approach to whatever our business customers are looking for, really provides the whole value chain of addition.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the topic of charitable giving and philanthropy. Obviously, it sounds like there are a lot of good business cases for using Web3. There are also a lot of individuals that can be empowered by ownership in this space. But maybe, Hannah, we'll start with you. What is the nexus of charitable giving and the digital art community?
So early on in our company, we decided that philanthropy and charitable giving were going to be a core value. And the way that we introduced that was really encouraging our artists, our creators, and also from a corporate giving point of view, for us all to do transformational giving. And what that looks like from a creator point of view is every time that there's a drop, which is essentially releasing a creative code project on art blocks, a significant portion of that goes to a 501c3 that the creator designates. And that's really resulted in some incredible giving, honestly, like unanticipated some examples that I can think of just off the top of my head are over $1 million going to Doctors Without Borders. A creator on our platform was actually able to save the life of his mother because he donated in a significant way to a treatment that was not yet ready to go, kind of like out into the public. And then, from a corporate point of view, we reinvest back into our community and the creative process, and the idea that there are a lot of communities that aren't able to get into this world. So we try to support that through our charitable giving.
Andy, I know Circle recently had a partnership with the Stellar Development Network that was announced, but can you talk a little bit about how USDC is used maybe kind of globally with charitable work and other causes, or anything else that Circle's been doing that we should know about?
Yeah, there are kind of two streams of charitable giving that we're seeing, and sort of humanitarian assistance work. One is picking up on what Hannah was saying, is we've seen a huge uptick in donations using USDC. There are some incredible platforms out there like Endowment and the Giving Block, which collectively last year processed more than $70 million in USDC funds, which again is getting some of those marginal users that may not be major donors, but have a few dollars here or there to contribute, because quite frankly the costs are so low of transacting in charitable giving. So that's one stream. The other is looking at the more institutional, the old school players. We just rolled out a partnership that you mentioned, Kristen, with the UN High Commission for Refugees, as well as the Stellar Development Fund and MoneyGram, which to provide assistance, cash assistance to recipients in Ukraine. And the program was in many ways similar to other UNHCR programs, in that the end recipients were able to cash out and receive value for purchases on the local market. But the real game changer was that both the UNHCR got more visibility into the process. There was more accountability and ability to track where the funds were going, as well as the actual recipients were able to store value on the blockchain rather than carry around cash in their pockets, which, if you're internally displaced or a refugee, is a huge, can be a huge source of risk, and obviously security in crossing borders. And so it created kind of a value-saving structure that we're seeing manifest itself in more ways.
Dominic, anything to add?
Sure. The Storage and Storage Institute has done a lot of outreach in the community. So we do it primarily as a development organization through things like sponsoring events such as hackathons, doing grants for the traditionally underserved communities, just generally being involved and being at the ground floor. So my favorite thing is really personally sitting at a hackathon, working directly with students, hearing about their ideas, hearing about their projects. And yeah, they might win a couple $1,000s, right? But they've then built a relationship. Like, we're connected on GitHub. We're actually producing value. And that's been fantastic.
I want to go back to something that's come up several times in the conversation, but it's this idea of decentralization. And we're obviously sitting here with 3 individuals that work for, a centralized organization. Maybe starting with you, Andy, could you talk a little bit about, what Circle is and how it's related to USDC, and what is the connection with a token that is or an asset that is operating within a network and the company itself? Because I think it's important for people to sort of understand the distinctions between the network and then the companies that are operating on top of the network.
Yeah, so fundamentally, USDC is an open source protocol, essentially. We allow our customers to build through APIs and other interfaces the tailored needs of their business to, whether that is conducting foreign exchange transactions to foreign suppliers, whether it's companies that are interested in providing remittance payments. That infrastructure is all built on top, and I think that's again kind of key here to understanding the value add and the sort of the progressive nature and delivering some of the benefits of Web 2 to the smaller scale users and companies. But yeah, I think that's when I look at some of the most interesting examples of USDC use, there are companies that have to pay, let's say, I saw this one earlier this week, a software service provider in, let's say, Iceland, and there's not that many certainly affordable bank options to transfer large-scale amounts of, large-scale funds transfers, and they're able to do that for a fraction of a percent, including the foreign exchange conversion through USDC by kind of circumventing the multi-hop banking connections that it would take to get there. That's just one case. That's a more traditional one, but there's kind of everyday growing use cases across the world of Web3.
Hannah?
I feel like we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but certainly like the speed that you're referring to, in our philanthropic giving, the responsiveness and the ability to make change in a really impactful way, almost instantaneously, I don't think you would be able to do without operating on USDC. I even think about, like, to your point, like old school wire transfers and waiting, several days for it to get across and cleared, and then verification, and this is just kind of seamless. But I don't think I answered your question about decentralization for art blocks.
Yeah, well, how does, well, yes, I don't know if there's anything else to add on that front, but, what is the interaction with art blocks and decentralized networks?
So I think it's something that we try to keep close to us as core value, with the knowledge that sometimes you have to operate in a centralized way to get things done. But certainly the idea that we are taking into account the kind of vulnerability that comes with decentralization. So we're really listening to everybody. We're inviting our community to talk to us, and we're responsive in real time. I feel like we're a part of kind of a ecosystem that I wouldn't have seen before decentralization was theoretically happening in the world.
And Dominic, you talked earlier, and we did talk about this a little bit with the Storage, the company, and the Storage Institute. What are some of these different entities? How do they interact with one another to contribute to the broader overall network?
Sure. So the Storage Institute is a philanthropic organization separate from Storage, funded by Storage. Storage Incorporated, don't have my badge on, is the organization that is in charge of the decentralized storage network. So when I was at DWeb Camp, before this we were chatting about DWeb Camp a little bit, worth looking up. There was a term coined, and it was minimum viable centralization. And I like to...
What is that? I've never heard this term.
Minimum, and that is not me. I heard that term, and I will repeat it forever. We need just enough centralization to keep it on the rails. So as we've built the network to be decentralized. First of all, our software stack is open source. It's fully open source. Anyone could effectively run the storage network. That being said, to date, I will highlight that we run the satellites. Other people in the future will run satellites. We, for instance, might run a philanthropic satellite. We work very closely with Brewster at the Internet Archive. Well, maybe we can run another satellite. We can have them manage it. And it would, of course, pay the operators a bit less, but they know that maybe 20% of their capacity, that is storage and bandwidth, will go to causes they support. So the network has been built to be fully decentralized. You can use it in an end-to-end encrypted fashion where you're the custodian of your private key, so we're all holding all the Web3 ethos. But again, today, we operate the largest satellites on the network because that is how you start a project. the success we've had today is evidence of why that is working. And we look very forward to both community satellites, be philanthropic or not, joining the network.
So is the thinking that over time, the level of minimum viable centralization is going to diminish as the network grows and more people contribute?
Always less centralized. All
right. Well, I have no idea how much longer I'm supposed to go, so I'm going to ask everyone, which I apologize. Maybe we'll start with Andy. Why don't you give us sort of your parting thoughts and perhaps a prediction for what is going to happen with crypto and Web3 in 2023?
Yeah, and I think I'll start by just kind of noting that there tends to be a general perception that Web3, that blockchain technology is a hobby of industrial nations, and the fact is that the data is not backing that up. When you look at entities that are or countries that are highest in adoption, above 20 or 30% of users. Of populations using cryptocurrencies, 17 out of the top 20 are developing nations. And so this trend is moving forward, and it's really being built on a payments platform. That being said, a lot of the technologies that we're seeing up here, there are many more companies waiting in the rafters, really for the critical signal from Washington, from other regulators, that there's a structure and that there's safeguards to put into this industry. And so I think, last year Deloitte put out a poll in which 85% of merchants polled said that blockchain, crypto assets were going to be ubiquitous in the next 5 years. I think that we're getting very close to that tipping point, which will be the signal from regulators establishing a framework, which will really actually get to get across that hurdle.
Hannah, any closing thoughts and predictions for 2023?
Yes, mine is pretty unsubstantiated and very different from yours. I really feel like, I'm definitely the long game on that the virtual world will be as significant as the physical world. And so the idea that your virtual identity will be as important to you as your in real life identity, I think is going to be the kind of big transition we see in the next year. I know I'm just going to use my 8-year-old as an example, who I snuck in here today. He didn't want like a physical thing for Christmas. He wanted Robux. And I was like, if I'm going to really give him what he wants for Christmas, it's going to be a digital asset, which was kind of mind-blowing. So I guess my big prediction is, what does identity look like in the next year? What are those like soft signals that we're starting to see happen around us? And I think those are the things that are going to become really important.
Dominic?
From the storage perspective, storage, the company, we're going to see a lot more adoption from traditional Web 2 enterprise organizations that want the benefits that Web 3 brings them, mainly cost, performance, resiliency. You're going to see that capital inflow over the year as we land more and more deals and we grow the network. And as the network gets bigger, it gets better. Every node that is added makes it faster, makes it more resilient. Drives economies of scale, right? Value. So this year, from our perspective, you're going to see a lot of traditional organizations that hadn't considered a blockchain adjacent project like storage in their infrastructure. You'll see that take off.
I'm going to add my own prediction because I'm closing and I can't. Listen, I think 2022 is a really rough time, I think, for the broader crypto ecosystem. But I think the silver lining in what happened in all of the sort of exuberance of late last year and then the sort of the downturn in 2022 is that anyone that was in it for the wrong reasons is now out of it. And what we're left with in the broader crypto community and industry are the really good ideas, the really good people, the really good projects that will withstand the test of time. And so I think what I'm excited about as we get through 2023 and through the end of sort of this bear market is when I talk to people in the crypto industry, they are building, they're planning, they're growing, and they're actually getting us to that phase where a lot of these ideas that are maybe only used by a small group of people right now are really going to be sort of come into their own and reach that level of mass adoption. Where I think, a year from now, or 2 or 3 years from now, this is going to be an even more dominant topic here at CES. So with that, why don't we thank Dominic and Hannah and Andy for joining us today. Give them a round of applause. We'll take a quick break while we transition to the next panel, but thank you, everyone.